Let's talk about going down rabbit holes. Hello and welcome. Welcome to Input English. Today's topic is going down a rabbit hole. Going down a rabbit hole is an expression you will hear from time to time in English. It's a metaphor. It typically means that things unfold in unexpected ways because of something you did. The term comes from a book written by Lewis Carroll in the mid-19th century. Lewis Carroll was on the faculty at Oxford University, and he wrote this novel, children's novel, about the adventures of Alice in Wonderland. In the story, she tumbled down a rabbit hole, then lots of extraordinary things happened to her because she fell down the rabbit hole. Now, in modern life, we're not literally falling into holes, but things happen and one thing leads to another, and the consequences can be completely unforeseen. Literally, I am here today talking to you today because I fell down a rabbit hole. How so? Well, we had the global pandemic. We had great disruption of our day-to-day, and there were many activities that we would have tended to do that were unavailable, off limits. We weren't allowed to travel. We weren't supposed to congregate. It was a tremendous disruption. So most of us, whether we wanted it or not, had some time that we needed to repurpose. And during the pandemic, I chose to read literature in the Western canon. I found a site that curated recommendations for great literature, and I read and read and read. One of the books I read was Don Quixote. Now, my history with Don Quixote is a funny one because I tried to read it decades earlier, and the translation that I had bought was horrible. And I either literally or metaphorically threw it across the room. I stopped reading it because the translation was obtuse. It was dreadful. During the pandemic, when I got onto the YouTube channel for Benjamin McAvoy, he said, oh, by the way, some translations of Don Quixote are better than others, and if you get an old, dreadful translation, you may find yourself throwing the book across the room. I thought, that's me. And then he said, well, there are two really good modern translations. One is Rutherford, and the other one is Grossman. He told me a little bit more about Edith Grossman. Edie Grossman was a professor in New York. She had a doctorate in old Spanish literature, and she worked in academics in that field for decades. She fell down a rabbit hole one day because a friend of hers, a fellow academic, brought her a passage in an old version of Spanish and said, could you translate this for me? And as she tells the story, her retort was, I'm not a translator, I'm a professor. I'm not a translator. To which she was told by her friend and colleague, you can call yourself anything you want. I just need this piece of literature translated. Can you help me? Well, with that common sense approach, she did the translation. And then again, as she tells her story in an interview, she said that she really enjoyed it. She found that she could work in her pajamas at a laptop with nobody bothering her. She found it to be delightful. It was that discovery that allowed her to consider taking on a bigger work, and that resulted in her doing a complete translation of Don Quixote, which is arguably, if not the best, it is certainly one of the best translations available into English. Good for Edie Grossman. She fell down a rabbit hole. Well, when I read Don Quixote as translated by Edie Grossman, I also fell down a rabbit hole because the suggestion by Benjamin McAvoy was if you enjoyed reading the translation of a work, maybe you should learn the language and read it in the original language. That did not cause me to literally make a decision. What it did was cause me to have more of an open mind. I considered the possibility and I did a deeper dive. I looked a little more closely at that. So Don Quixote was written in Spanish. So you might say, well, just learn Spanish and then you can read Don Quixote. Perfect. No. It's an older version of Spanish. It's early modern Spanish. And so it is the Spanish equivalent of the way Shakespeare wrote, because they were writing at roughly the same time. So I decided that it was completely impractical for me to read Don Quixote in Spanish because of the version of Spanish it was written in, but it did allow me to think, you know, I really would like to learn to speak Spanish because there are many other authors where their original work is written in Spanish. So it was on that day I fell down the rabbit hole of learning Spanish and applied myself very diligently. The pandemic taught me how to repurpose time. The pandemic taught me how to prioritize the use of my time. And to a great extent, I eliminated time wasted during each day. I learned to reallocate large blocks of time for the given purpose. That habit from the pandemic lent itself very well to language learning. So I put 3 to 4 hours a day on comprehensible input. That meant that my contact with Spanish was very concentrated, and I learned a great deal over a relatively short period of time. The next branch in this journey occurred when Pablo Roman, the creator of Dreaming Spanish, issued on a video the challenge that people need to make comprehensible input in the various languages, including English. I saw the wisdom in that, and that was the birth of the Input English channel. So from time to time, you may hear or see the reference "fell down a rabbit hole." And now you understand that it's a series of adventures that unfolded in unexpected ways because of a choice that was made. It's a very timely topic because the amount of intellectual stimulation available and information available allows people all the time to follow one thing to the next thing to the next thing and fall down rabbit holes. I invite your comments below. Have you had such an experience? Is this such an experience? I hope you join us in future videos. See you soon.